Thank you for listening to our Remote No Pressure podcast. I mentioned a couple episodes ago, that we have an exciting announcement coming up this fall. So go to our website, remotenopressure.com, and sign up for our mailing list, and you're going to be the first one to hear about it. Super exciting. It's just going to be great. We're very excited about what's going on. And also, if you love what you hear, go to your podcast platform, as iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or whatever it is, and give us a review. It helps. This week we're going to talk with Phil Lund. He is a Steelhead Fanatic for over 60 years. He's been fishing for these things. A natural teacher, and he's just phenomenal. And he talks with us about his friend Bob York and his relationship with his father. But one of the takeaways that we got from the interview with Phil was his advice on dealing with grief. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, we have Phil Lund with us. Thank you for being with us today, Phil.
You bet. My pleasure.
So, reading through your website and your philosophy, there was a time when someone was out fishing you 30 fish to one. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened?
Well, that's kind of the dark side. I was very much against striking or keating fishing because I'd seen guys just really wail on them when the rest of us swinging were struggling. And I had voiced that opinion, verbally a number of times. And we were fishing on the Hull River on the Olympic Peninsula. There was 4 of us. We're all experienced anglers. And the water was cold, and we were swing fishing, and we weren't catching anything. And after 3 or 4 days, we hadn't had a grab. And there was a guide from Montana that was guiding steelhead there, nymphing with beads and yarnies, which is a little ball of yarn. And they were just hooking one fish after another, and they weren't even casting very good. And it was it was difficult because I've been steelheading now close to 60 years. I know how to do it, and it was painful to watch inexperienced anglers hooking one fish after another. And I had guided for 8 years in the 1970s, and I moved over here and retired, and then decided to drive school bus for Paterra schools just to have a way to be part of the community and get out of the house a little bit. And when I decided to go back to guiding, to be efficient over here, you just need the nymph of beads. And so I really didn't want to do it personally, but as the guide, that's what people were expecting. So I had a guide friend that was an expert at it. In fact, it was the guy on the Hull River that was hooking all those fish for his customers. And so I went with him and learned how to do it and got good at it. And so, I have nymph. Like I said, it's the dark side. It's the Darth Vader side of my life. But when I personally go fishing, especially in BC, I don't nymph. When I fished on the Upper Quinault and the Queets last April, I swing fish. So, but when I was guiding, if the customers wanted to, we nymphed.
That's a good approach. Putting your pride aside every once in a while and serving your customer. That's the reason I'm sure you've been so successful, Phil, in your guiding life.
Well, yeah, I'm on an incredible river here. As a matter of fact, 6 years of guiding, and we only had one day we didn't land a fish, and we had 3 on that day. It's just an amazing fishery over here. And if you swing fish, you can hook, on an average day, you can hook a couple fish. But a lot of the customers I have are business people, and they want to have some success, and they don't mind nymphing. So I did it for them.
Hmm. And you mentioned earlier you've been doing this whole fly fishing thing for over 60 years. What what's what has sparked that? What sparked that initial interest in fly fishing? How did you find your passion for fly fishing, Phil?
Well, that's a good question. When I was a young man in my teens, I learned to catch steelhead on the North Fork of the Stillaguamish. And the North Fork of the Stillaguamish is fly fishing only in the summertime. And I learned to fish there in the winter casting spoons. And I got really good at it. Well, spoon fishing and swinging a fly have a lot of similarities. You the tension, not getting too deep, getting deep enough, a lot of those things. Um, and so I just started fishing there in the summertime, and I was a student. I had time, and then I became a school teacher, and I had summers off, and so I fished a lot in the summertime. And I didn't realize back then that you could catch winter run on a fly. And so in the wintertime, I gear fished. And then in the 1980s, I was up on the Skeena with Bob York, a friend of mine, and my father. And I found a pot of fish in the Skeena, and Bob was camped up at Wookie's campground there on the Kispiox, and I went and got him. And I was gear fishing, and he was fly fishing. And my dad and Bob and I had one of those really special days. We landed 23 steelhead in the Skeena in one day.
Wow.
And I watched Bob catch 7 on flies. And
Mm.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that flies could be that effective. And I made the decision right then to put my gear away forever.
Wow.
And I did. And that was about 30 years ago.
Wow. Now, Bob, is he still alive or?
No, Bob passed away, unfortunately. I put his ashes in the Kispiox, the Skagit, and the Grand Ronde rivers, 3 rivers that he loves very much.
Yeah, you gave him a little bit of a shout out on your website how he used to come by and you guys would have coffee and talk. Was he quite a bit older than you, Phil, or was he a colleague of yours?
Well, Bob York is a legend in the Northwest. He was born in Oregon in the Clackamas River. His dad was the foreman in the sawmill in the Clackamas um, River area there. And Bob, he had one of those moms that was kind of henpecky type. And when he was about 5 or 6 years old, he went fishing with his dad, and he was away from his mom for the first time. And he made his decision right then he was going to live in the woods, and he did. He was a logger and a commercial fisherman in Bristol Bay, and he fished steelhead about 4 or 5 months a year. And Bob probably went to more watersheds than any man alive. He had a big jet boat. He traveled up and down the British Columbia coast and Alaska,
Hmm.
and went into different rivers and would spend a month or two at a time in these rivers. And Bob and I were friends, and we talked a lot. And he said one time, he said, "I've never been to the Quinamass." I said, "I'm going." I had to go somewhere that he hadn't been. So yeah, I went to the Quinamass a couple of times, and he was very interested in hearing about it. So Bob was a character. He's an amazing guy. He caught 8 steelhead over 30 pounds, and
Wow.
I don't know how many people have done that, but yeah, I I learned a lot from Bob, and I also taught Bob a lot. So
Hmm.
it was kind of a symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
Now you had mentioned your dad, and on your website, I think you had said that he helped you buy your first jet sled and helped you get up and running. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in college, I applied in 22 school districts to become a PE teacher, and I only got 3 interviews, and they didn't go so well. it was tough to get a job, and my dad and I went over fishing on the Queets, which is on the Liffey Peninsula, and we were talking, and I said, Dad, I'd like to be a guide, and I need some help, and so he loaned me at that time, which seemed like a lot of money, but it was only like 7 grand to buy a used boat, and I started guiding on the Caliph. Well, lo and behold, about 3 weeks later, I get offered a job teaching in the Seattle Public School District. So I wound up doing both, and I guided for about 8 or 9 years and taught school for 9 years, and then moved on to some other adventures. So
Mm-hmm. Would you have a pretty good relationship with your father then, Phil?
my dad was a wonderful man, and I loved him very much. And the reason I quit guiding is he got real sick and was in the hospital for almost a month. And I realized that why am I going fishing with all these people I hardly know? I should be fishing with my dad. So I quit guiding right on the spot.
Mm.
And dad recovered, and that was in 1978, and he lived until 1992. So he was my fishing partner for the next 15 years. So I did the right thing, and it was the easy thing to do too.
Well, one of the things that we really value on our podcast are honoring those who have gone before, like Bob York. He had a big influence on you and your father. What was your father's name?
Odin, Norse god Odin. He was Norwegian, and he named my middle name Odin.
Oh, wow.
And we called him Odie. I called him Dad, of course,
Uh huh. Sure.
but all his friends called him Odie.
And was he fly fishing or did he do mainly regular jig?
No, Dad was a spoon fisher, and he and I learned together. Well, he did it a few times, but he never got proficient at it. I I just was a natural at it. In fact, I caught a steelhead on my fourth cast the first time I went on the North Fork of the Stillaguamish, and then in late 1980s or 1990, I can't remember when, Bob York invited me to go to the Bella Coola River in British Columbia, which at that time was a great spring river. And so I flew up there, and he was already there, and he he had saved this one hole. He'd found some fish in a hole called Canoe Crossing, and he hadn't fished it for a couple of days, and so he takes me up there. But he goes first.
Of course.
he he saves the hole, but then he goes first. Well, luck would have it, I caught a 16-pound winter run on my fourth cast, just
Wow.
like I'd caught a summer run many years before. And when the trip was over, I'd landed 4 and he'd landed 1, and he said to me, "You'll never go ahead of me again." I said, "Bob, I've never gone ahead of you yet."
Yeah, that's a great story. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, you're not a young man. You have a few years on me, Phil. Looking back on your life, what would you say has been your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement is having a personal relationship with the Lord.
Hmm.
But as far as fishing goes, I've had a lot of great days. Um, I saved 2 people from drowning.
Hmm.
I'd have to say that was pretty cool. Yeah, just sometimes it isn't about how many fish you catch. It's you know, things that happen on the river. I was one time when fishing with the guide. I paid a guide because I've done that a number of times because I like to know what they know. And we sat down on a rock and started talking. He told me about how his father had drowned right there 10 years before, and this is the first time he'd been there since he drowned. And I had lost my 9-year-old son to a tragic illness. And so we sat on a rock together and cried for a few hours. And it was a really special time, you know.
Wow. Wow. And would you say that fly fishing and your relationship with the Lord, Phil, would you say that has really helped you through those really hard times?
Well, um, I think your question was, uh, did that help me get through a hard time?
Yeah.
Was that your question?
Now
Yeah, it did.
my question, Phil, was your relationship with the Lord and fly fishing. Have did those things help you deal with those hard times?
Um, yes and no. I kind of ran amok for a little while after my boy died, and I've been able to counsel a number of men who have lost their children since then because I've been through it. I always knew the Lord, but for a while I wasn't living for Him, and it took a little while for me to get my act together. So I would say yes and no to that.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as fishing goes, I didn't go fishing for quite a while. I just didn't have the desire. And actually, I went hunting first, and I was in Cokeville, Wyoming, and just like 4 or 5 months after he passed away, and there was snow on the tree limb, and I grabbed some snow and put it in my mouth, and it reminded me of me feeding him ice chips for 24 hours before he passed away, and so that just brought a flood of emotions to me. You know, that was a really, really hard time, and but um, since then, it's been a long time since he passed away. Um, my relationship with the Lord is really, really special, and I just wish everybody had it.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you um, sharing that and talking, because there may be some people out there right now that are dealing with someone they love with a disease, or going through that. What would you say to encourage them?
Well, I'd say that obviously I would encourage them to have a relationship with God, but other than that, um, and people sometimes don't want to hear this, but the reality is that the best healer is time.
Mm,
You have a grieving process you have to go through. Everyone goes through it a little bit differently, but we all go through it. And, like, for example, was drinking a little too much, and at night I'd run to the cemetery, crawl under the fence, run to his grave, crawl, lay on it and bawl for hours and stuff like that. And then just one day I realized this isn't accomplishing anything. This is crazy. So I stopped. And but time is the best.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Phil. I really appreciate
Hmm.
that. And it's wow. I mean, that's a lot, Phil. And I just admire you
Hmm.
for going through that. And now, are you married, Phil? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm having my 50th anniversary in a few days. So I married my high school girlfriend, and when we were dating, I told her I would uh, quit fishing 3 days a week and limit it to two, and so I kind of exaggerated a little bit.
I thought you were gonna say I'll quit 3 and only fish 4, but well,
Thank
congratulations,
you,
Phil. That's no.
thank you.
Now, does she fly fish, or does she not fish at all?
No, she doesn't fish, but she's the luckiest fisher person in the world. I'm telling you, she's been fishing with me 3 times. She caught a 2 15-pounders and a 16-pound steelhead in her 3 trips, and it's she's amazing. One time we were fishing on the Toodle before Mount St. Helens blew, and I launched the drip boat, and I was underneath the bridge right where the boat launch was, and I said, "Come on, fish." She said, "No, I want to read." I said, come on, we just got here. You got to fish a little bit. No, I want to read. Well, there was a long street stretch there, and I said, well, will you fish at least till we get around the corner? She says, okay. She makes one cast, catches a 20-pound spring chinook, land the boat, land the fish. We're still looking at my truck, right,
Uh-huh.
in the parking lot. And she says, now can I read? So, no, she's not a fisherman, but
But 50
she's
years.
been good. She's been good about letting me go, though. You know,
50 years doesn't happen by accident. I'm sure that
a lot of work, a
a
lot of
lot
work.
of
Let me
work.
tell you. Yeah,
Oh, that's great,
yeah.
Phil. That's great. Well, I appreciate you taking some time with us. I mean, as far as a fishing, where would you say is your favorite place to fish? What would you consider your home water? Where would that be, Phil?
Well, home water is a great way of putting it, but it doesn't really apply in my situation because my favorite place to fish for steelhead is the Thompson in British Columbia. It's a big river with huge boulders like basketballs with slime on them. It's the slipperiest steelhead river in the world, and I have fished the North Fork and the Umpqua, so I can speak with some authority. Um, the steelhead are huge. They take the fly. There's the trains going to the interior British Columbia and all through Canada go right up to Thompson on both sides, up on one side, down on the other. Um, it requires long casts in some of the runs, and it's just an amazing place. It just, I love the Thompson. Now, I'll catch a lot more fish on the Dean or even the Scan. Um, Certainly on the Manhow where I live or the Grand Ron, you catch a lot more fish today. But there's just something about the Thompson that, to me, it's the show. It's the bigs. It's the top of the ladder, the most challenging place to fish, the greatest fish, and without a doubt, it's the Thompson River.
Of all of your years guiding, Phil, and we've got a lot of guides who listen, and we interview a lot of guides on this. What would you say to encourage them, or what is something that you learned with all the guests or all the clients that you've guided for? What's something that you learned?
Well, one of the things that I've learned is that everybody knows something that I don't. And so while I'm guiding people, I try to learn something that they know. I try to make the day um, special and that they learn something from me as well. You know, I've listened to most of your podcasts so far, and I'm a little different than a lot of these guys. I'm extremely intense. Okay. When I'm fly fishing, I'm thinking about what my fly's doing. And if I don't get a grab on that cast, my next cast, I'm thinking about how can I present this fly in a different way that's going to interest the fish if there's one there. I don't see grizzly tracks on the shore. I don't see eagles flying overhead. I all I'm doing is focusing on that water and trying to make my fly entice the fish if there's one there.
Hmm.
And I'm just totally focused on that. Now, I am intense in that way, but I'm not intense about not catching them. If I don't catch them, I still have a great day.
Hmm.
It's not that, but I am very, very much focused on what I'm doing. I'm not the guy that brings a piece of driftwood back to camp that would look great with flies on it in the rec room. I am just so into the water and the fish that
Hmm.
you know. And to me, that's how I lose myself. I was a builder in 2007 and 8 and had 31 houses under construction and went through a tough time right then. But when I'm fishing, I'm not thinking about houses. I'm not thinking about the market. I'm just focused on the fish and the water. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own approach, and that's what I love about the podcast is we can appreciate people of different backgrounds and people with different experiences and approaches. And I approach the water probably pretty similar to you as far as I move around a lot. If I'm fishing and I'm not catching fish and I've changed my, my approach and I'm not catching anything, I move. So I cover a lot of water very fast.
Hmm.
And kudos to my father-in-law, John. He fishes with spinning gear, but um, I mean, he's like, I think he's like 6'6" or 6'7", and he can just move through
Hmm.
the water without a problem. And he taught me, you you got to move to get fish. And he probably fishes a lot like you too. He's just very focused and results oriented. But I think I'm sure you do, and everybody else just really appreciate the whole process in catching fish and being outside and the water and everything. But yeah, that's interesting
Hmm.
that's your approach.
Well, again, I'm very focused on the water, but I've slowed down a bit. I sit on a log and visit with guys now, and then the years past, I never would happen. At least not in the daylight. Um, yeah, I've kind of chilled out a little bit. I'm not into competition.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm trying to beat other people or whatever, but I'm into being the best fisher that I can be and presenting my fly the best possible way that's going to work in the situation we're in. Because these are different places. Sometimes they want the fly coming real slow. Sometimes they want it moving a little bit, and maybe scripting in or whatever. I mean, it's different everywhere you go. Some places you got to get down, other places you don't. That's part of what makes the sport so incredible. And I love fishing in new places. I went to the Suspect for the first time just recently, and I just oh, speaking of catching a lot of steelhead in one day, I went to Jurassic Glacier last November.
Hmm.
Like I think I caught 150 steelhead in one day
Oh
there.
my gosh.
Oh, well, I mean, it's crazy. That doesn't even count. There's landlocked rainbows, but they were steelhead at one time. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a great day. It's a great day. Well, if people wanted to talk to you or send you an email or ask you questions about anything that we discussed today, Phil, how would they find you? How would they get in touch with you?
My email address is gunrodbat@gmail.com. I normally don't answer the phone very well, but I answer my emails 2 or 3 times a day. I gave a spade casting lesson today to a guy who's going up to Alaska. I still do that. But if somebody wants to just talk about the sport or about going to certain places, because I've been a lot of places, um, I'd be glad to talk to them and share everything I know. I don't have any secrets anymore. I'm 71 years old. Um, I'm, it's I'm running out of daylight. I'd be glad to share places, times, information on just about anything. And I have a lot of information stored up after doing this for, holy cow, 60 years. I've been doing this. So, yeah, long time.
Now, what is your website? You have a website.
I do. It's metowriverguide.com. That's METHOW riverguide.com. But unfortunately, my river's been closed since November of 2015 because of poor returns in the Columbia and the Upper Columbia. So I don't know if it's even going to open again. I didn't even renew my license this year because I have to buy insurance and the license and everything. So I don't know. I mean, if I guide again, I do. If I don't, I don't. It's not a huge deal to me. I do it for the enjoyment of teaching people how to fish. I was a school teacher for 9 years. I have a teaching instinct in me. I like to help people. I like to help people cast better. I like to talk about theory and why did so and so hook 20 and somebody only hooked 5 on a trip. There's reasons. And I like talking about that and sharing things. And I've gone fishing with a number of guides just because, as I said earlier, I want to know what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I don't think I went with 4 or 5 different guides. I only caught one fish.
Wow.
But that's not why I went.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't to catch a fish. I've caught lots of fish. I don't have to catch a fish. In fact, I went with Jim Teeny, and when I went with Jim, he said there's no fish. I said I don't care. I'm not going to catch a fish. I just want to learn how you fish, and I want to hear your philosophy and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cool. He was happy. We didn't even go fishing until like 9 in the morning. We were off early, because that's the reason I went. I was totally satisfied with my day with him.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we'll put your email address and your website in the show notes so people can find you. And we really appreciate you taking time with us, Phil. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. It's been fun.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you for listening to the Remote No Pressure podcast. Don't forget to go to our website, remotenopressure.com, to sign up for our mailing list. And until next time, go fishing.
It's time to dance and be free. Live the life you've always wanted, like the wind inside the trees.